Long before the world called Kenya the rising military power of East Africa, its soldiers were forged in the fires of the British Empire. Serving in distant World War battlefields, bound by discipline few could match, that British legacy became the DNA of the Kenya Defense Forces, a force that now stands at the crossroads of ambition and adversity. Today, Kenya's military boasts secretive special forces and cutting-edge drones, yet still wrestles with aging tanks, tight budgets, and the scars of infamous attacks like El Ade. How did a colonial regiment evolve into a regional powerhouse on the brink of transformation? The real story of Kenya's military ascent, its hidden origins, international alliances, and looming challenges, is more complex than almost anyone realizes. British rule in East Africa began with soldiers, not statesmen. In 1895, the British established their first colonial outposts in what would become Kenya, and almost immediately, military organization followed. By 1902, the King's African Rifles, known as the KAR, was formally raised, drawing recruits from Kenya, Uganda, Nyasaland, and Tanganyika. For decades, African soldiers in KAR uniforms stood at the sharp end of imperial power, enforcing colonial order and defending British interests across the region. When the world went to war in 1914, the KAR was thrust into the chaos of the East African Campaign. Kenyan battalions fought German forces in the tangled bush and swamps, enduring disease and privation as much as enemy fire. Nearly 30,000 African soldiers from British East Africa served in World War I. The war left scars, but also a legacy of discipline, drilled into men who would one day become the backbone of a new nation's army. The Second World War expanded these horizons even further. Kenyan soldiers in the KAR served far from home, fighting in the deserts of North Africa, the mountains of Ethiopia, and the jungles of Burma. Their reputation for toughness grew. In Burma, KAR units slogged through monsoon mud and dense forests, supporting British and Indian troops against Japanese forces. The experience forged a core of African non-commissioned officers and junior leaders, men who learned logistics, tactics, and the iron routines of military life under British command. But the colonial army was never just a fighting force. During the Mau Mau emergency of the 1950s, the same KAR battalions were turned inward, deployed to suppress anti-colonial uprisings in the Kenyan highlands. The violence was brutal, the loyalties complex. Many African soldiers found themselves fighting fellow Kenyans, caught between imperial duty and the stirrings of national identity. Among their ranks were future leaders. Idi Amin, who would later rule Uganda, served in the KAR in Kenya during this time. As independence approached, the British left behind more than barracks and parade grounds. They bequeathed the military institutions steeped in hierarchy, ceremony, and the unyielding rhythms of British drill. The officer corps remained almost entirely British, but the ranks were overwhelmingly African, men who had marched, fought, and saluted under the Union Jack, but now faced an uncertain future. When the flag changed in 1963, the structure remained. The Kenya Rifles, direct descendants of the KAR, formed the new nation's core military unit. The DNA of discipline, forged in colonial campaigns and world wars, would shape every step of Kenya's military journey from that point forward. In the years after independence, Kenya's military faced a new kind of test, one born not on the battlefield, but in the tense corridors of power. The collapse of empire across Africa had triggered a wave of army mutinies from Ghana to Tanganyika. In January 1964, Kenya's own barracks trembled with unrest, as soldiers demanded higher pay and faster Africanization. The government, barely a year old, called on British advisors to steady the ranks. Within days, British officers and training teams arrived in Nairobi and Nanyuki, leading urgent drills and restoring order. This intervention was not a one-off. Throughout the 1960s, British Army training teams rotated through Kenyan bases, running courses in leadership, logistics, and internal security. The Nanyuki mission of 1966 stands out. A full year of joint exercises where Kenyan officers learned to command units on their own soil, but under the watchful eyes of British mentors. These programs produced a new cadre of Kenyan leaders, fluent in British doctrine, yet sensitive to local realities. Western influence did not stop at the parade ground. As the Cold War heated up, Kenya's strategic values soared. The British secured overflight rights, staging areas, and access to key airstrips. Meanwhile, the United States sought a foothold of its own. In the early 1970s, a quiet agreement allowed American technical teams to set up a satellite tracking and monitoring site near Mount Kenya, just outside Nanyuki. The compound bristled with dish antennas and secure radio huts. Its mission, to monitor Soviet activity in the Horn of Africa and track satellites passing over the region. Officially, the data belonged to Washington, not Nairobi. Kenyan officers provided security and logistical support, but the flow of intelligence was tightly controlled. At its peak, up to 50 American staff rotated through the site, working under strict secrecy. These partnerships brought benefits and trade-offs. Kenya received advanced training, access to Western equipment, and steady streams of military aid. In return, British and American interests shaped everything from officer promotions to procurement plans. Defense budgets in the 1970s dedicated as much as 30% to British training and technical support. Some in government worried about dependency, but President Kenyatta and his advisors saw stability as the higher prize. As the region's politics grew more volatile, Kenya's military became an anchor for Western security, its officers equally at home in Nairobi's State House or London's Ministry of Defense. The roots of today's joint operations and intelligence sharing can be traced to these early deals, when Kenya's sovereignty was balanced day by day against the realities of Cold War alignment. On the morning of October 16, 2011, the Kenya Defense Forces crossed into southern Somalia. Operation Linda Nchi was underway. Its objective: dismantle al-Shabaab strongholds and secure the border. Brigadier Anthony Ngeri and his staff coordinated columns of armored vehicles, infantry, and air support, pushing through dense bush and hostile terrain. The first weeks brought heavy clashes near Afmadao and Dobli, testing logistics and the nerve of young officers leading troops beyond Kenyan soil for the first time. By mid-2012, Kenyan units had reached Kismayo, a strategic port city and al-Shabaab's main revenue source. The battle for Kismayo lasted days. Kenyan naval gunfire and helicopter-borne commandos spearheaded the assault, forcing militants to retreat and shifting the balance of power in southern Somalia. But the fight came at a price. Improvised explosive devices, ambushes, and suicide attacks became routine hazards. Junior commanders learned to adapt, blending conventional tactics with counterinsurgency skills honed on the job. The war in Somalia did not stay across the border. Al-Shabaab retaliated with a wave of terror attacks inside Kenya. September 21, 2013, 4 gunmen stormed Nairobi's Westgate Mall. Security forces, including KDF's elite units, launched a rescue operation that stretched over 4 days. While dozens of hostages were freed, the siege exposed critical gaps, coordination failures, friendly fire incidents, and allegations of looting by some responders. These failures triggered a painful reassessment of urban counter-terror doctrine. Commanders from General Julius Karengi down ordered joint drills and new rapid response protocols. Yet the threat kept evolving. On April 2, 2015, Garissa University became the next target. Al-Shabaab militants killed 148 people, most of them students. KDF's response, though faster than at Westgate, still faced logistical delays and intelligence breakdowns. The attacks left scars on the national psyche and forced the military's hand toward deeper reform. Then came El Ade. Before dawn on January 15, 2016, al-Shabaab fighters struck a remote KDF base in Somalia's Ghetto region. 2 suicide car bombs shattered the perimeter and hundreds of militants poured through the breach. Communications collapsed. Reinforcements failed to arrive in time. By the end, at least 150 Kenyan soldiers were dead, the highest single-day loss in KDF history. Survivors described chaos, confusion, and desperate last stands. The aftermath brought national mourning, parliamentary inquiries, and a clampdown on media coverage. Yet, within the ranks, commanders quietly began overhauling base defenses, intelligence sharing, and quick reaction protocols. Lessons written in blood reshaped the way Kenya's military wages war, both abroad and at home. The tempo of operations accelerated, but so did calls for modernization, better equipment, and a renewed focus on soldier welfare. The next phase would demand not just courage, but transformation. Kenya's military ambitions run up against a stark reality. Every new operation, every hardware upgrade is measured against a tight budget. In 2023, Kenya's official defense spending hovered just below $1.2 billion, barely 1.2% of GDP. That figure is modest not just by global standards, but even compared to regional rivals like Egypt or Nigeria. The result is a constant balancing act. Commanders must stretch resources to cover frontline deployments, peacekeeping missions, and modernization drives, often with little room for error. Equipment maintenance is a daily headache. Much of the Kenya Defense Forces arsenal is a patchwork: Soviet-era T-72 tanks, British armored cars, American MRAPs, each with its own supply chain, each vulnerable to spare part shortages. When a Ukrainian shipment of T-72s arrived in Mombasa in the late 2000s, the deal quickly became a symbol of procurement headaches. The tanks were held up by a pirate attack, then dogged by allegations of price inflation and shell companies. Parliamentary audits flagged millions of dollars in unexplained markups. Yet few officials face consequences. Such scandals, while less endemic than in some neighboring states, still cast a long shadow over military procurement, feeding public suspicion and straining trust between the ranks and the government. Budget constraints also shape Kenya's role abroad. The Kenya Defense Forces is a regular contributor to United Nations missions, troops in South Sudan, military observers in the Congo, medics in Mali. These deployments are more than flag-waving. They are a form of soft power, earning Kenya diplomatic capital and technical training from Western partners. Exercises like Flintlock and Justified Accord bring Kenyan officers into joint drills with US, British, and NATO counterparts. For many, these partnerships are lifelines, sources of equipment, intelligence, and professional development that would be hard to sustain on national funds alone. Yet, ambition outpaces resources. Liaison officers and auditors work overtime, tracking every shilling, reporting to Parliament, and justifying each procurement. The tension is clear. Kenya wants a modern, responsive military, but every new initiative, whether drones, cyber units, or naval upgrades, must compete for limited funding. The result is a force that punches above its weight, but always with one eye on the ledger. As the Kenya Defense Forces looks to the future, the gap between vision and budget remains its most persistent adversary. Kenya's military is shifting its focus, investing in technology that promises to change the way it defends its borders and projects power. 6 Turkish Bayraktar TB2 drones, acquired in 2024 after Kenyan crews trained in Turkey, now patrol the skies over the Somali border and the coastline. These drones, capable of staying airborne for nearly 27 hours and reaching altitudes of 25,000 feet, stream live video and targeting data to commanders on the ground. For the airmen and engineers at the new Drone Operations Center, the TB2s offer a new kind of reach, tracking militant convoys, guiding precision strikes, and doing it all at a fraction of the cost of manned aircraft. On the digital front, Kenya's Cyber Command, established in 2022, is taking on threats that can't be seen from the cockpit. This battalion, housed within the Signal Corps and reporting directly to the Ministry of Defense, recruits specialists in forensics, malware analysis, and electronic warfare. Joint drills with US and UK teams have tested the unit's ability to defend classified networks and battlefield systems. The 2023 defense budget set aside new funds for secure networks and rapid response teams, making cyber defense a permanent part of national security. Along the Indian Ocean, Lamu Port is transforming into a fortified hub. The Kenya Navy's Mandabey base next to the port is getting a $50 million upgrade. New radar, integrated command posts, and Shuja-class patrol boats. These additions let the Navy and Coast Guard monitor shipping lanes, intercept smugglers, and respond quickly to piracy or terror threats. The doctrine is simple. Every pier and patrol boat must be ready to switch from commercial escort to combat at a moment's notice. The new Naval Control Center is expected to be fully operational by mid-2025. Kenya's ambitions now stretch into space. In early 2023, the Ministry of Defense began a feasibility study for a homegrown surveillance satellite, working with Israeli and Turkish partners to design a CubeSat-class platform for intelligence and secure communications. No launch is expected before 2026, but the goal is clear: reduce reliance on foreign imagery and give Kenyan commanders their own eye in the sky. Each of these projects answers a specific vulnerability: drones for border gaps, cyber units for digital threats, naval upgrades for maritime security, and a satellite for independent intelligence. The result is a force that, despite budget constraints, is now equipped with tools that once seemed out of reach. Uniforms and parades do more than signal military strength. They shape the way a nation sees itself. In Kenya, the defense forces are woven into the fabric of public life, appearing on national days, in bustling county stadiums, and in classrooms where young people gather to imagine their futures. For many, the sight of soldiers marching down Kenyatta Avenue or performing precision drills at Jamhuri Day celebrations is a source of pride, a reminder that the military is not a distant power but a living part of the community. Recruitment campaigns reach deep into rural and urban Kenya alike. Officers travel to secondary schools during National Career Week, answering questions about training, education, and the promise of a career in uniform. The Ministry of Defense underwrites scholarships for students in the Kenya Science and Air Cadet Program, encouraging talent in physics and mathematics to consider a path in the armed forces. Each year, select students are invited to tour air bases and engineering workshops, meeting pilots and technicians who once stood where they do now. The military's outreach goes beyond recruitment. KDF medical teams run free clinics in remote counties, while engineers repair schools and roads after floods or droughts. These civic programs are as public as any parade, shared on national television, discussed on social media, and celebrated in local newspapers. For families affected by disaster, the arrival of a KDF convoy means more than security. It brings hope and practical help. National events like Mashujaa Day and KDF Day put women in the spotlight. Female officers lead color guards, pilot helicopters and fly past, and speak at open house days, challenging old stereotypes. In 2014, Major Catherine Laboso became Kenya's first female combat pilot, qualifying on the F-5 Freedom Fighter jet and later flying humanitarian missions in the C-27J Spartan. Her story, profiled in media and echoed in her own words, urging young women to dare to soar beyond the ceiling, has inspired a new generation. Today, she mentors cadets and appears at recruitment drives, showing that opportunity in the KDF is not limited by gender. For many Kenyans, the military stands as a symbol of unity and progress. Yet the challenge remains: how to sustain this momentum when economic pressures, shifting youth interests, and global uncertainty threaten to pull talented recruits elsewhere. The answer may lie not just in new technology or hardware, but in the promise that service offers, a future built on duty, education, and the shared pride of a nation. Kenya's defense forces operate on just $1.2 billion a year, less than 1.2% of national GDP. Yet their reach spans from UN peacekeeping missions to high-tech drone operations. Archival records confirm the KDF's roots in the King's African Rifles and Cold War-era alliances, shaping decades of discipline and Western partnership. The 2016 El Ade attack and the acquisition of Bayraktar TB2 drones in 2024 show a force tested by loss but driven to modernize. However, some realities remain hidden. The full details of procurement deals and internal cyber capabilities are still classified. Kenya's ambition to become East Africa's leading military power is clear in its Lamu port upgrades and cyber battalion. The evidence shows a military balancing inherited tradition, operational challenges, and rapid technological change. As new chapters are written, the question remains, how far can Kenya's military reach, with resources still stretched thin?